Two people can stand in the same place at the same time and only one of them sees something. So the question isn't always what people see, it's why some people notice more than others. Hi guys, my name is Matt Harvey. I am the founder and lead investigator with Deep Woods Paranormal. I am also the host of the Deep Woods Paranormal podcast. So we're going to talk about that today because I get that question a lot of times. Why is it that I can see something you can't, or vice versa? So, section 1, this isn't about being special. Number 2, the brain has filters reality. How the brain filters reality, 3, environmental changes and perception. 4, life experiences that change awareness. 5, why children and animals notice things first. 6, skeptics versus experiencers. 7, how does the paranormal respond to awareness? Section 8, the question that sticks. Okay, let's get into this, guys, because this is really near and dear to my heart. It's something that, again, people ask me all the time, Matt, you go into a location that's said to be haunted, you experience all this stuff and nobody else does. Why is that? Okay, so section 1, this isn't about being special. It's not gifted versus ungifted. It's not awareness versus filtered. Some people just don't see because they're not, not because they're not special. It's because other people pay more attention. I've noticed that I'm very aware of my surroundings and what's going on. Even with my hearing loss, I still hear things, see things, feel things, experience things that others don't. I don't know why that is. I've never had a bad experience growing up, but I did experience ghosts all the time. My family was very loving and stuff like that. Never had any bad experiences with my parents or anything. Not exactly sure why I was chosen to see things. I have had some close calls with life where I've almost expired a few times, actually more than a few. And I feel like and I don't want to bring religion into this, but I am closer to God than a lot of people. I've had a lot of experiences with the paranormal, and we'll get into that here. So I consider myself to be extremely observant, and I noticed when I used to investigate with other people, especially if that was their first time or whatever, they weren't really as focused on what was going on around them as much as I was. I just got used to being around ghosts or whatever you want to call them. Some people just call them straight up demons. Some people just say that, they're not real. Some people say they're a figment of your imagination, whatever. I don't know why. I can't tell you that. My explanation is basically that I think that I'm just more aware of what's going on around me. Maybe I'm more open to it, and we'll get into that again here down the line here. But anyways, like I said, I think my awareness and maybe because I know that they're real and that I know that there's something going on, I've kind of picked up on, I grew up with them. So maybe because I've been around them so long, I've developed an awareness to them, if you will. Their energy, if you will, and they know me as well. So again, we'll get into that kind of talking down here later on, but how the brain filters reality. And I think this is a big one, to be honest with you, because our brain waves, we're just energy, if you think about it. So our brain's just basically like a big supercomputer, right? It's just a computer that's packed into the side of our head that controls everything we do. Controls our motion, our ability to talk, and stuff like that, our interactions. Believe it or not, we pull energy off the earth and out of the atmosphere as well. We react to other people's energies and stuff like that. And as I've always said, I think just ghosts are just some kind of energy that is out there. I think that they're more of just a leftover energy from that person. Maybe there's some kind of intelligence to it. I know we've been into several places where we've interacted with things, and it's just like, how did it just do that? And how did it say its name? How was it able to communicate with us in that way? And I think it's just some kind of energy. And I think that a lot of the times, if you look at what's happening, look at the devices that we use. They're all, basically recording audio, video, or heat or something like that. It all has to do with energy, right? And I think that the entities that basically are able to manipulate our brain waves and to show us, basically, I've said this before, I think they manipulate our brain waves to show us that they're there. I think they can communicate through us and with us, maybe telepathically. I think that they're able to change the energy in the environment that they're in. I think that they do feed off of our energy because we do give energy out and stuff like that. In fact, Colleen, who I just interviewed, Colleen Collins, she's going to be the next guest on our paranormal podcast that'll come out on Thursday, guys. This is Tuesday, so if you just look for the next episode, 241, she'll be on that. Really amazing person, by the way. Awesome interview with her. Really look forward to talking to her again in the future. But anyways, so yeah, in talking to her, essentially, she says a lot of the same things that my wife says and a lot of other people that we interview. And I really think that it's just basically, as it says, the brain filters threats and patterns. Most people ignore what doesn't fit in their daily survival. The brain actually decides what matters. And I think some of us, if you grew up with ghosts, like, Colleen and I and Amanda and a lot of the people have, you're more open to them. Your brain is like, okay, that's part of my normal now. And so when you go into an environment where there's something, maybe that's, the reason you're able to see things, hear things, feel things, smell things, whatever. You just have to be more open, as Colleen was saying. But anyways, so basically people are missing obvious details, hearing a sound but not registering it, seeing movement but dismissing it instantly. I think it really does kind of go into like a survival mode. The brain does, because if you're in a location and you're not thinking that there's going to be anybody else there, or or your brain perceives it as a threat, yes, your brain's going to start rationalizing things. Doesn't matter if it's ghosts or Bigfoot or UFOs or Dogman or haunted location or whatever it is, anything paranormal, right? Any kind of paranormal activity, it's going to rationalize things first, because then you're not going to be so scared. Because if you're afraid of the paranormal, which a lot of skeptics seem to be, imagine flipping your life around on its head, right? Oh my gosh, it's real. It's kind of a crazy experience. It's happened to me multiple times. It changes your whole perception of everything. It really does. It really changes how you feel. So the question is, what if the paranormal isn't rare? What if the awareness is? That's a question that people ask me, why, if it's more of an awareness than paranormal. And getting into that, I mean, we can really go down this rabbit hole if you guys want to. I don't think we should really get into it on this podcast because we'll be here for hours, but reality might not be reality. Let's just put it that way. Our perceptions of what really is might not be. I always kind of joke about, maybe we're in the Matrix, or maybe we're on some ship flying through, space somewhere, and we're just in a little pod and we don't even realize that we're just dreaming, right? So, anyways, let's just keep going with this. It's just a little, tidbit for you guys to kind of chew on. Put your information, go down to the comments and leave me a crazy comment. What's your thought on that? Is it perception? Is it reality? Is it awareness? What is your thoughts on that, guys? Let me know. All right. So environmental changes in perception, this does play a big role. When you go into a location, and it doesn't have to be paranormal or anything like that. Let's say you go to a new location. Let's say you're on vacation and you're out somewhere where there's some woods, or maybe there's a old building or something like that you can actually sneak into. And I don't condone sneaking into anywhere without permission or trespassing, but let's say you can legally go into those locations, or maybe there was a battlefield, or maybe there's a cemetery or whatever. I don't care if you're a believer, skeptic, somewhere on the on the fence, whatever. When you guys go into these new locations, your perception changes. Whether you think something's paranormal or not. Maybe you have a Bigfoot encounter. Maybe you have a UFO encounter. Maybe you go into a haunted location for the first time. You're in there and you're skeptic, or maybe you're a believer, and all of a sudden something moves. Your perception just changed, right? You're like, what the heck? And skeptics are going, I'm going to rationalize this. I'm going to try and figure out what this is. For the believers, you're like, oh my gosh, there's a ghost. For the people on the fence, you're like kind of in the middle. You're stuck in the middle. You're going, wait, how did that just happen? You're trying to figure out what you're trying to rationalize what just happened, but you're like, wait, maybe it's a ghost. Maybe it's something not. Maybe you see an apparition. And you're like, okay, well, maybe that was just a car going by and reflection of headlights. Or you're trying to figure out what it is, right? And the skeptics like rationalizing in their brains so much that they're like, maybe it's fear. Maybe they're not afraid of it. Maybe they're just, that can't be real. Maybe it's denial. Maybe it's whatever. And you're basically going, there's no way. It doesn't matter. Some people are just, doesn't matter what experience I have, it will never be paranormal in nature, right? So like I said, maybe you hear a noise, maybe you hear talking, and the skeptic goes, well, there must be somebody in here, right? And the person on the fence is going, yeah, that, okay, maybe that makes sense. And the believer's going, no, it's a ghost. It's a ghost. So, and honestly, you have to be kind of in the middle if you're going to explore the paranormal. You can't be one way or the other. You can't be, skeptic. You can't be a believer. You have to be on the fence at all times with all evidence. Otherwise, everything's going to be either never going to be a ghost, no matter how good of evidence you get, or everything will always be a ghost or Bigfoot or a UFO or whatever. You got to be really careful about your evidence, right? So essentially, let's say you're in that location and then you're trying to find answers, right? Your brain's trying to rationalize that, right? You're trying to figure out what it was. So you need to find rational explanations and eliminate those first. And that's something that we were taught by the TAPS family member team. Figure it out. Find out what it is. Eliminate everything else first before you call it a ghost or a Bigfoot or a UFO. Just, make sure that nobody else can debunk your evidence, right? So, like I said, noises, you have to figure out what that was. So you walk through the building, try and figure out, okay, there isn't anybody here. Maybe somebody's, in the back of the building. Maybe you heard somebody outside. And especially with audio too, because audio recorders are so good at catching audio these days. They can pull noise from everywhere around you. You have to be really careful about when you go through and assume something's an EVP. And if you don't know what an EVP is, it just stands for electronic voice phenomenon. And that's where you record, you go into a location that's said to be haunted, whatever it is, a building, a house, an environment somewhere, and you're recording audio and you ask a question and you leave a silence hoping for an answer, and then ask another question hoping for an answer, and then maybe you play it back and you think you hear a whisper or something like that. Supposedly ghosts talk under our ability to hear, right? The decibels are lower than what we can hear. So the audio recorders can pick that up and do pick that up. And so you have to go through and figure out what that is. So here's an example for Bigfoot researchers or hunters or whoever, whatever side of the fence you're on, the believer, non-believer. Let's just say you're out hunting, or maybe you're camping, or maybe you're working a night shift somewhere, or maybe you're a security guard, or maybe you work the night shift like I do. Maybe you work at a hospital. Maybe somewhere you're working at night, or maybe the day. Maybe there's nobody at the location you're at, or maybe it goes quiet, like at at hospitals after like 8 o'clock, it goes completely quiet so people can sleep and stuff, right? Maybe you're out in a forest. Maybe you're out there, you get out there early that night, or maybe you decide to camp for the night and you find a good spot. It's secluded, it's away from everything. There's no real civilization around. Maybe you decide to put your tree stand up and you climb up there and you have your gorilla suit on or whatever. You're well blended in. No deer's going to see you. And you're up in your tree and you're watching, and then you start to hear rustling. And you're looking around going, okay, what is that? Right? You're like trying to figure out what that was. And then you hear a tree knock, and you're trying to figure out, maybe you've never heard a tree knock before, and so you're like, well, what the hell, is there another hunter out here? Maybe somebody's shooting in the background, because that's what it kind of sounds like. If it's distant or you've never heard it before, it kind of sounds like, it can sound like a gunshot. And you're like, dang it, that person, that other hunter just beat me to my deer, right? Maybe you hear a scream, and just the god awful scream, or you hear a whoop, and you're like, what the heck was that? I've never heard that noise ever before. I don't know what that is. Your perception all of a sudden changes of that forest, right? Maybe, like you said, you're you work at a hospital, maybe a hotel somewhere, and let's just get into the working at a hospital, because I think that's a really good example. A lot of hospitals have a lot of paranormal activity that people don't realize. A lot of energy at hospitals. A lot of things happen in hospitals. A lot of old, residual energy gets left, and sometimes also, unfortunately, there is other energies that get left that are more knowledgeable or able to communicate with us, and they're more they're like they're just like us without the shell, if you will. Anyways, so you're let's just say you're a nurse, and that room that you just cleaned up is empty, there's nobody in there, but all of a sudden you hear a commotion, and you're like, what the heck, there's nobody in there, the door's open, I can see in there, there's nobody there, but it sounds like somebody's walking around and maybe moving a bed or a piece of equipment in there, and that somebody maybe just passed away in that room, right? You walk in there and you're looking around, you're going, okay, you check the bathroom, you're looking around, there's nobody here. You go back down, sit down, and start maybe typing on your tablet or whatever you're doing. And then you hear another commotion. You get back up, you walk back in there, and you're looking around, there's nothing. And then as you're walking out, you hear a voice, hello. And you're like, what? You turn around, there's nobody there. Your perception just changed, right? You're questioning, okay, did I just hear that? What did I just hear? Well, thanks for the goosebumps, guys. What am I experiencing? Like me right now, I got goosebumps. They love it when I tell stories. This room is very actively haunted. But anyways, there's a lot of paranormal energy in this room. Anyways, so yeah, maybe you get the goosebumps. Maybe you walk in there and you get the goosebumps, right? And you're like, what is that? It's not cold in here. It's not hot in here. Maybe you run into a cold spot in a warm area. Maybe you run into a warm spot in a cold area. And you're like, what is this? You just notice changes. And all of a sudden your perception changes, right? Now, all of a sudden you've gone from maybe being a non-believer or being a skeptic to be coming onto the other side. You're more aware of what's going on. I just experienced something, right? So, like I said, the environment changes your perception sometimes. And a place you've been 100 times and never experienced anything, all of a sudden you experience something paranormal. Maybe you see something in the sky. Maybe, unfortunately, you have an abduction, something like that. That's terrifying, but or maybe, unfortunately, something triggers a memory of that, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? So maybe you walk into somewhere that it just triggers a memory and stuff like that. So, okay, life experiences that change awareness. Okay, so we kind of talked about this a little bit above, so let's keep talking about it. Things that can cause this trauma, grief, stress, sobriety, weight loss, health changes, spending time alone, long term outdoors? Um, did you start to notice more after something changed in your life? So let's talk about trauma. You know, maybe a family member passes away, maybe a good friend passes away. Maybe you're involved in a car accident and let's say you come back from the other side. Um, maybe you've had a really bad experience that causes a lot of grief or stress. Um, Maybe you got involved in things that you shouldn't have. You drank a little bit too much. You popped a few pills. Um, Maybe you had some health changes. Maybe you lost a whole bunch of weight or something. Something in your body has changed, right? Maybe you went from being a very social butterfly to spending more time alone. And so maybe you're writing a book, or maybe you just need some time away from everybody. Maybe you work a job that is basically secluded. Um, maybe you spend a lot of time outside, out in the outdoor exposure. Okay, basically you spend a lot of time out in the woods, which was me. I used to spend a crap ton of time out at Black Star Canyon. It was my getaway from reality, or maybe I don't know how you would say that. Maybe it was my reality check or whatever. I don't even know, but it was just basically my way to go get away from life for a little bit, right? And to experience something new. And so all these things can cause your brain to perceive things differently. Um, like I said, maybe you lost someone. Maybe you are not open to the paranormal. Maybe you're not a believer. Maybe you're just on the fence. Maybe you've never experienced anything paranormal ever in your life. Maybe, when you're sleeping at night and you just lost somebody that you love, all of a sudden they come to you and they say goodbye. And that's a very hard one for me because of my mom. But anyways, um, essentially maybe that happens to you, right? And essentially that creates, that opens you up a little bit more. All of a sudden you've seen an apparition or you've experienced something possibly paranormal, and so you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe it does exist, right? Maybe that is real, or maybe there is a possibility that that could happen. And so that kind of like opens the door a little bit for you to possibly go, oh, well, you know what? I'm a little bit more open to this now. And as you open that door a little bit, as Colleen was saying, and I really, like I said, I really enjoyed that conversation with her. She kind of answered a lot of my questions. Um, but basically, she basically talks about stuff, and I don't want to get into that conversation too much. I want to have you guys go ahead and listen to it or watch it, because there's a lot. Like I said, it was a lot of fun to talk to her. But yeah, I mean, that just talking to people that grew up in this, similar circumstances to me and stuff, it just reinvigorates me because it's like, okay, I'm not alone and stuff. Anyway, so yeah, any of these things, any kind of a life change can change your perception of things. And I really do think that the paranormal is kind of our perception, um, because we basically project energy out as well. As you saw a minute ago, I kind of reacted to my mom passing, or maybe listening, maybe heard in my voice. But yeah, I mean, those things that happen, they can they can open you up a little bit more, and sometimes because those things happen because you had that one experience, maybe you do live with a ghost, or maybe you live with a Bigfoot around you, or maybe there's a dog man around you, or maybe you actually live in a haunted location. All of a sudden, that triggers them to say, okay, this person can see me now, or knows that we are real, and I can kind of show myself or whatever. I think the people that are more open to the idea of spirits and ghosts, or whatever you want to call them, angels, demons, whatever, whatever your religion calls them, or if you're non-religious, whatever you want to call them. I call them entities, I call them energy, I call them all kinds of stuff. Whatever you want to perceive them as. maybe they're not ghosts. Maybe they're not the dead. Maybe there's something else completely, right? There's something else out there, right? And so the more open to it you are, the more experiences you're possibly going to have. So let's talk about why children and animals notice things first. Kids, like me, as I grew up as a kid, I never was told that ghosts aren't real, right? My parents didn't believe in it, but they never told me that what I was experiencing wasn't real. They just left it. They just let me do my own thing. And there's a lot of, like Colleen talks about that too. Her family was very embracive of it. Amanda's family was very embracive of her ghostly the ghostly activity going around her. They embraced it. Unfortunately, my mom did. My dad we never really talked about it much. We have now as we've gotten to be adults. But the kids don't really have a filter yet. They don't really know, okay, especially when they're real, real young and maybe they're just learning to talk or maybe they're just starting their first steps and stuff like that. They might point to something. They might be seeing something that you're not. And you're like, okay, it's just a childhood friend, or maybe it's just something else. You have already basically experienced, they're experiencing something that they haven't been told isn't real yet. They weren't told that, hey, that doesn't exist. They're just open. They're really open, right? They're absorbing everything. They're like a sponge. They're, dogs and animals too. Animals are very perceptive of everything around them. They're perceptive of our energy, of everything going on in the room. They don't really react with logic, right? And most of the time, dogs will respond before maybe humans do. Mainly because number one, they usually can see better than us, they can hear better than us, they can smell better than us. Shorty is extremely our little. He looks like a Doberman, but he's not. He's our black and tan dog. He is extremely perceptive to the paranormal. Mama dog grew up on a Joe's property where there was Bigfoots. And so anytime I play any kind of Bigfoot sound, her ears perk up and she's looking around going, oh crap, where are they? She is very aware of that. She grew up with that. I mean, she's used to the tree knocks. She's used to the screams and the howls and whatever else they did. I mean, she's a paranormal witness in herself. I mean, Shorty, he was only about 3 months old when we rescued him. But he doesn't remember any of that. But he is very perceptive of everything. He's the one that goes out to the back area back there and where the fence is and where the forest is. He sits there and he'll look out there and I don't know what he's seeing. I really don't. Well, I've seen a couple of things sometimes when he barks. Something will move and you can see it move. Like when something was down in the culvert that day and he was screaming his head off about it. And I went over there to look at and see what I could see. And the only time I saw was the movement. I just saw a shadow. Anyways, like I said, kids at the point where they're, 5 and under, most parents tell their kids, oh, ghosts aren't real, monsters aren't real, all that stuff, because they don't want them to be afraid of it, right? They don't want them to be scared of the dark. They don't want them to be afraid to go to bed. They don't want to be in there and oh, you said monsters are real. There's a monster in my closet now. And the scary part of it for parents, sometimes, most of the time, you go in there, you don't see anything, you don't hear anything, you don't feel anything, you're not experiencing what they're experiencing. But yet they're experiencing something and they're experiencing something, they want to crawl into bed with you or whatever. They're afraid of whatever's going on. Probably mainly because they don't understand it. And other times because sometimes spirits and ghosts or whatever you want to call them, entities, can be a jerk, if you will, and just like to get a reaction. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're very protective, stuff like that. But anyways, like I said, and sometimes animals, when you're walking through the forest or whatever, they'll start to perceive a threat before you even know it's there. Horses are really good about this. Deer are really good about this. You ever see a deer, you're walking down the path and all of a sudden there's a deer there and they look up and, you see their ears going like this, twitching back and forth. And all of a sudden they're perceiving you and they're like, oh crap, I'm out of here. They're just skedaddle, right? They're gone. They pull a Scooby-Doo. anyways, yeah, I mean, I just think that their perception is different than ours at this point, at that point. Animals, especially, even birds and stuff like that, all animals seem to react. When you get close to something, usually, well, any kind of animal, if it's wild, they'll move away from you, right? Because they perceive us as a threat. And they perceive other things too. Like I said, they can hear things, see things. Some animals can even see in different spectrums than we can. Our spectrum's kind of here. And if you look at infrared, which is that red light, and then you look at full spectrum, which is purple, we don't see in that spectrum anymore, and stuff like that. So, anyways, um, skeptics versus experiencers. So skeptics aren't blind. Um, Experiencers aren't gullible. There's just different thresholds for acknowledgement. Um, seeing doesn't mean believing. It means questioning, believing more just means questioning less. Essentially, what that means is basically, a man and I could go into the forest, and when we start hearing tree knocks and screams and howls, and maybe we hear something walking, and which I really like about her, by the way, and she keeps me honest. She's going to go, okay, well, that's this, it's that. She's going to find a logical explanation for that at this point, right? Because she's never seen well, she doesn't know if she's ever seen a Bigfoot or not. She doesn't believe she's ever seen a Bigfoot, so she calls herself a non-believer, which is fine. And me, on the other hand, I've seen Bigfoots. I know they exist. I went from a non-believer to a believer. And that's kind of how you have to be. And I always tell people, I will say this for the millionth time, right? I don't expect anyone to believe until they have had an encounter where they can say that couldn't be anything else but. And that's a good experience. That's a good thing. You have to stay, like I said, you have to stay in the middle somewhere. You can't be a believer. You can't be a skeptic. You have to be somewhere in the middle. You have to look at it from both angles. You can't just, all of a sudden, oh, that tree knock was a Bigfoot. Well, how do you know that? You didn't see it do it, right? We need more evidence. So I believe that, the experiencers or the open people or the people that see these things, again, I think it just goes back to their perception. And the perception is, okay, maybe I've experienced this before. Maybe I know this is real. Like I said, between Amanda and I, we go into a forest and all that stuff happens. She's going to start looking for rational explanations. And me, I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to start checking off my list. Everybody has their own checklist in their heads, right? Okay, tree knock, possible, stomping a foot, loud footfall, if you will, screams, howls. To me, that says Bigfoot. But what I'm going to do also is I'm going to look down my list and just make sure there's nothing else. Amanda's going, okay, tree knock, that could be gunshots. She's going at screams. Okay, that could be some other animal, maybe that you just don't know what it is, right? She's going to start looking for rational explanations. And then, unless we actually see it, see the creature or the Bigfoot or whatever you want to call it, maybe it's a dog man, maybe it's something else. Maybe it was a deer. I mean, I found out one day that one of the noises I was hearing out in the woods was actually a deer, and it didn't sound anything like a deer. But my friend who's a hunter has experienced it before, and he told me, nope, that's a deer. He couldn't explain some other noises, but he could definitely explain that one noise. So now I'm like, okay, again, back to be in the middle. That was a deer, right? Um, Anyways, so like I said, as a believer, I'm going to look at something completely different than a skeptic. And the good news is if the skeptic and I sit down and meet and we talk about our experience together, we'll start checking boxes off, and we'll hopefully find something somewhere in the middle to meet where we can say, okay, I can understand why you say that's that, and then I can understand why you say that's that on both sides. You know what I mean? And basically at that point, we would have to have seen the Bigfoot for us to both agree on it. And it's not because anybody's right or wrong. It's just because there has to be more evidence at this point. So don't get mad at skeptics if they go through and try to debunk everything unless they're being a jerk. If you're a skeptic and then you're watching, I love you, man. I love you guys. Because you keep us honest. You have to keep us honest. We have to be honest about the evidence. If we're calling everything paranormal, then we're just not doing our jobs. If we're debunking everything and we know stuff's paranormal, then we're not doing our jobs. We have to find common ground somewhere. Um, anyways, does the paranormal respond to awareness? And this is a good one. Colleen and I were briefly discussing this. I wish I would have gotten into more detail with her about this. Maybe in the next interview with her, I will. Um, this is where it kind of gets deep. Now we're looking at this from the believer side. So my skeptics, just bear with me for a few minutes here, okay? Um, Activity stopping when it's noticed. Activity increasing after its acknowledgement. Patterns of escalation. So let's break that down. Okay, so activity stops when it's noticed. And this kind of goes into Bigfoot a little bit. It could go into ghosts too. I don't think it really has anything to do with UFOs or alien abductions, or I don't know about Dogman. Thank God I've never really, that I know of, encountered Dogman. I have a lot of friends that have, and those things, I don't know. That's kind of a crazy topic. I love the idea of looking for them, but I don't know if I'd really want to find a giant werewolf living in the forest, to be honest with you, especially if it's coming after me. So, um, yeah, so activity stop when it's noticed. So, if I go into a said beyond a location and I'm here, as I walk in, maybe there's music playing, maybe I hear talking, maybe there's footsteps going up the stairs or something like that. And all of a sudden it just stops. And I'm like, hello? Hello? I didn't know anybody was here, right? I'm looking around trying to figure out what's going on, checking out every room, trying to figure out what's going on. Was there somebody else actually in the location that I'm at? Did the radio get left on? Did something else happen? Is there some kind of explanation for that? And then I'm going, okay, well, there's nothing here. And so it's the spirit basically like, oh crap, I just got noticed. Was it residual energy? Maybe it's just like a rerun in time. Maybe it was going, and then as soon as I basically shut the door, it stopped. What? Maybe it was triggered by something else. I don't know. But maybe I go in, and as I close that door and I hear the whispering or whatever, or the footsteps or music or something else going on. Maybe I smell something. I smell cigar smoke, or maybe I smell like an old time perfume. And I'm talking about older locations here, guys, that this kind of stuff happens. Music and footsteps and talking and stuff like that can happen in any location. I don't care if it's a brand new build or if it's an old location, that's historic or whatever. Whether it's a building or a ship, or maybe it's a battlefield or a cemetery or whatever. Maybe it's a forest. Maybe the forest had some activity. A lot of forests seem to have paranormal activity, whether it's Bigfoots or hauntings or whatever, and stuff like that. I briefly discussed that with Colleen about that as well. So, um, maybe that activity picks up as I get in there. Maybe it's a Bigfoot location. I walk in and there's a tree knock, and I'm looking around going, okay, where'd that just come from? I'm trying to figure it out. And then maybe I'm looking over to the right, and then a tree knock happens to the left, right? And so I look left, and maybe another one happens ahead of me. And I'm looking around going, what's going on? Okay, so this is escalating, right? It's increasing. Maybe they're trying to let the other Bigfoots know, hey, there's somebody just entered our area. And maybe I heard a scream, a god awful scream. Now the activity is increasing more, right? Maybe they're trying to scare me out of the location. Maybe something comes walking out of the woods. Bigfoot, Dogman, whatever, comes walking out of the woods. Maybe it's a ghost. Maybe I see an apparition. And I'm like, okay, what the heck? Maybe I'm there to investigate ghosts, and I've got a K2 with me, and all of a sudden tree knocks start to happen, and like a Black Star Canyon, I'd use the K2 to communicate with the ghosts and ask them where the Bigfoots were, if they had seen Bigfoots today or whatever. And so they start lighting up the K2s to answer my questions, right? So essentially you go into that and you're looking at it and you're going, what the heck? What's going on here, right? And so things just kind of keep escalating. Maybe all of a sudden I get charged by a Bigfoot. Maybe there's like the sound of a bulldozer basically coming through the forest. You start hearing like trees being snapped off at the base. Maybe you hear something trudging through, something large trudging through the brush. And you're like, okay, time to go. um, you know, maybe you're at a haunted location and a door slams, or maybe you're at, maybe you're looking for a UFO and something comes starts flying towards you and you realize, oh my gosh, that's not a plane or anything. That's an actual flying saucer and it's coming right at me. Maybe, they're coming down to abduct me. I don't know. I'm just putting all kinds of ideas out there, guys, so bear with me. But, basically, my question to you is, do you think that awareness invites attention or exposes it? Uh, in my opinion, yes, I think it does. The more aware you are of your surroundings and the more aware of whatever, what's going on, the more you invite in whatever's going on, be it Bigfoot, be it ghosts, be it possible UFOs, Dogman, haunted location, whatever. If I go in basically looking for trouble, kind of, um, it's going to come to me probably, right? It's kind of like if I went into a bar and I'm looking for somebody to do something for me, and I'm looking kind of shady, and I'm looking for these somebody, to do a job for me. And I sit down at the bar and I ask the bartender, hey, I'm looking for this person, or I'm looking for a guy that can do this. Have you heard anything? Right. And, then I go sit at a booth and I'm waiting for this guy, a guy or girl, person, right? Somebody might come to my booth and sit down with me and say, okay, what do you need? Right. And I'm not saying bad or good. I'm just saying maybe I need, maybe I'm looking for somebody. Maybe I'm trying to, solve something. Maybe I'm trying to find, a missing person or whatever. Right. If I put the word out that I'm looking, something's going to come back to me. Right. Very similar in the paranormal field. If I go into a location, I start asking questions, and if I'm smart and I know some of the history of what's going on, and maybe I have some names, maybe I have dates, and I know what happened to the people that live there, and I've talked to the residents, or I've talked to the owners, or I've talked to the people that work there, or whatever. I know certain things that have happened, and I start asking questions. If you look at the Bigfoot side of it, maybe I've done my homework and I know there's been several sightings around this location. I know this happened, that happened. There's a road crossing. Maybe there was some tree knocks heard. Maybe somebody saw something in the forest, right? So I've kind of done my homework, and I've gone on Google Maps and dropped my pins. And okay, I go, this looks like a hot spot, and I go out to the location, and maybe I walk up to a tree with a bat, and I do a tree knock really loud, and all of a sudden I hear one back. There's that's basically, number one, possibly the entity, the paranormal, the ghost or whatever, acknowledging me by coming and communicating with me. Number two, it could also be, Bigfoot or whatever. Maybe I make a scream or something like that, and something screams back. That's an acknowledgement, right? And then basically from there, it just escalates. Maybe I do a tree knock and it does a tree knock back. Maybe I start hearing something walking towards me and I'm trying to record it. Maybe I have a thermal. Maybe I get it on camera, right? Maybe I leave up some trap cams and it comes by and checks out the trap cam or whatever. Anyways, but the more attention I pay to them, anything paranormal, and this goes with people too. If I walk into a room and I'm really focused on one person and I'm like, I want to go talk to, I want to talk to that person, but they're talking to other people and I keep kind of looking over there, and they catch me looking at them, they're going to notice that I'm watching them, right? And they're going to kind of try and figure out what I'm doing or if I need something or whatever. So they're going to come back over maybe later on after they're done with the conversation. Hey, what's going on? How can I help you? Or whatever. Or why are you? Maybe they're in a mood. And why are you staring at me, man? You know what I mean? So essentially, it's the same with the paranormal. The more attention I pay to it, the more attention it's going to pay back to me. If I sat in this room, right? I don't even want to say I don't even want to talk about gear, but I brought out a piece of gear, which is one of them is their favorite thing. And I set it down on the desk and I started talking and asking questions and stuff like that. Maybe I'm recording audio, maybe I'm not. If I'm using the ghost box or the spirit box, one of the two, they might try and start talking through the box, or maybe they're going to have a conversation with each other, which seems to happen a lot, and go from there. So the question that sticks in my mind, um, you know, if you did start to see more, would you want to? Comment down below. Oh, hello. I got coldness coming up from behind me, and more goosebumps. Yay. So, anyways, yeah, they love engagement. I'm telling you guys, the paranormal activity loves it when you communicate it with them, when you talk about them and stuff like that. So, anyways, we'll leave it with that, guys. You know, comment down below. Are you a believer? Are you a non-believer? And please be polite in the comments, guys. If somebody says something, whether they're a believer, a skeptic, on the fence, everybody has the right to their own ideas and stuff like that. So please don't be rude or anything like that. But yeah, like I said, would you want to see more? If you've never seen anything, would you want to see something? Um, if you have seen something, would you want to see more? Or would you want to just completely stop? I mean, I went through a period where, especially as a kid, I didn't want to see anything. I didn't want it. And at some point in time, I guess mentally I shut off and I shut them out somehow. Not completely, but I shut them out for at least 7 or 8 years, somewhat, because I was terrified of them. And, it was scary for me. And I didn't really have anybody to communicate with. Now I've kind of got a family of paranormal, people that I talk with. And of course, Amanda, who's really helped me. But a lot of people don't have that outlet. So again, I'm hoping that this podcast is a way for you guys to see that you're not alone. Okay, you're not alone. There's a lot of us out there that experience things that we can't explain either, and be it ghosts or Bigfoot or UFOs or an abduction or Dogman, Bigfoot, or some other kind of paranormal experience, paranormal activity. You know, you're not alone, and stuff like that. So, anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you guys on the next one.